All right. So, welcome again to another discussion and episode of Own Your Yes Live. I am your host, Valera Wilson, and this is where we get to come together as women to share our struggles and our successes, and our lessons learned on the way to success. This is the conversation for imperfect ambitious women so that we can thrive together. So this is where I get to talk to wonderful women like the woman who I'll introduce shortly about the things that they've learned and how do they continue to grow, because I really think there's an opportunity for us to thrive beyond showing the highlight reels of our perfect lives on social media or LinkedIn, but to really get honest and get real. So today I am so excited to have with me Jiwani, who is the COO, the Chief Operating Officer of Ascendant. And we are going to talk about something that I think is so powerful and important, but doesn't get enough recognition, particularly in the workplace. And that is the conversation of fertility and the journey to motherhood. Thank you so much, Shamina, for joining me today. And I'll let you share your background, about what you do currently at Ascendant.
Sure. So Ascendant is a fintech company. We specialize in international payments. And so I do the non-traditional COO role, which is, marketing, sales, product prioritization and product management, mid-office operations. And so I have my hand in pretty much everything, which is why I love it. I love my job. But on top of that, I am a mom. And I always say this in my bio, and people are kind of like, seriously, but I'm a mom to a six-year-old daughter, Malia, and a 3-year-old son, Emre. And I will say, you may notice that there is a little problem with my headset, and that is courtesy of my 3-year-old son that thought it was a good idea to put that on and throw it off last night. And the reason I'm wearing a headset is because my 6-year-old daughter is about 20 feet away from us right now doing some homeschooling with her music class. So I thought that might not be appropriate background music.
Hey, I love it. That's a perfect scenario and backdrop for our conversation and topic today about fertility and motherhood. And you mentioned something before we got started. This is actually you're in Canada. So everyone that's listening, you're in Canada, and this is an important week in Canada too, right?
Yes, it's National Infertility Awareness Week. And, to be quite honest, I learned about it last year, and I was so happy that it actually exists. But I thought it was very smart of you, Valera, to time this in conjunction with National Infertility Awareness Week in Canada. Thank you.
Oh, that's so funny. I had no clue. So when you told me, I thought, oh, wow, this must have been ordained, right, for us to talk this week, because I literally had no clue that this was National Infertility in Canada, out of all places, right?
Take the credit, Valera. Take the credit.
I'll take it. Thank you for giving it to me. So, tell us what has been your journey, Shamina, to get to where you are? What challenges presented themselves on the way to motherhood as you progressed your career?
Yeah, so I guess I'll first say that I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I was that kid that babysat, that, always wanted to be a mom, and even talked about adopting kids when I was early. And my mom was like, what is wrong with you? Just worry about that later. But I always knew I wanted to have kids. So I focused on my career. I, was doing all the things that a lot of us did. And I got married in my 30s. And so we started having or trying to have a child immediately after I got married. I think I was 34 at the time. And we, I thought, like everybody around me, my friends, their husbands would look at them and they would get pregnant. And so I thought, hey, you know what, this is going to be awesome. And I'm going to be 35, and then I'm going to be 37, and we're going to have our 2.2 kids with our white picket fence, and it's all going to be fantastic. Every month it would be, your 2-week wait. And anybody who's gone through fertility or has tried to get pregnant knows the agony of that 2-week wait. Where you're like, oh, does anything feel different? Am I pregnant? Am I not pregnant? And I went through that for 2 years, and it literally destroyed me. Every month there would be tears, or there would just be that devastation. And so my husband and I chose to use a fertility clinic and start looking at those options. And so we went through the whole gamut at the fertility clinic. And so we did IUI, which is the sort of equivalent of artificial insemination. We went through an exploratory surgery, and then we went into IVF. And we were lucky. We had 5 embryos from IVF, which is really great. And the first embryo they put in me was Malia. And so I thought, okay, we've had 2 years of trouble. This is all over. I now have 5 in the freezer. We are laughing like, well, this is going to be it. And so gave birth to Malia. And then we said, okay, it's time for number 2. Didn't want to wait too long. And of course, we went through the 4 and no luck. And then we tried a couple more rounds of IVF and no luck. And my husband and I talked about adoption. We talked to families that had adopted, that had a biological child. And then we chose to go down that route. And we were able to adopt my son, Emre, from Morocco in 2017. So definitely not the journey that most people had. As I said, everybody around me was just getting pregnant left, right, and center. It took us a lot longer than we thought, but in hindsight, I don't think I would have changed a part of it. If you told me I would have said that at that time, I would have said you're crazy and probably sworn a little bit at you. But that's sort of the evolution of how my crazy family came into play.
And they're gorgeous. I love the pictures. I mean, won't show them, but
Thank you.
both kids are just absolutely gorgeous. And no, share about the process of adopting Emery, because I think that's one that when you've shared it before, I thought, wow, that's amazing, because you actually live in Canada, but you went to Morocco, I think, for some time to adopt, right?
So I think the first thing was making sure that both of us were on the same page, right? So I knew I was there, but it was really important that my partner was on that same page. So before we even made the decision, it was lots and lots of conversations. And what actually helped us make the decision was speaking to other families that had adopted. And it was different for us because we had a biological child as well. And so it was asking a lot of those tough questions like, can you love a child as much if they don't have your blood or if they don't come from you? And, it's an easy answer when you're answering it politically correctly, but when you don't know who that child is, what they will look like, what health concerns they may have, what developmental concerns, they may come with, you have to really dig down and say, yes, I'm going to love them as much as my biological child. I'm going to be okay with whatever comes, down the road. And those are hard conversations to have to just start the process. And then once you start the process, it is a freaking long process. It is, you got to get your home study done. You got to get your police checks. You got to get all your reference letters done. I'm lucky that I come from my background in the sense that I managed it like a project, right? And it was like this, and this needs to get done. And then once that's all done, you have to get the country that you want to apply, to adopt the baby from. And then they have their own set of rules. So once we had our home study done, we moved to Morocco. We got matched with a baby in Morocco. And we moved there for 6 months to go through the Moroccan process. And so that process involved, going through a series of interviews, and we'd only get to see the baby for 2 hours a day. So, you'd go see him, and then you'd have to leave him every day, and you just hope that he was getting, the right care and all of that fun stuff while you're kind of hustling around in the background, going to court, trying to, prove that you're good enough to have this baby. And they're obviously, a lot less comfortable with foreigners adopting than local Moroccans. So it was a process. And then once that happens, you have to, once you get their approval, you then have to get your visas and bring the baby back to Canada. So, it's a process. It's a financial commitment. It's a personal commitment. But it definitely makes you stronger going through that.
Wow. How long was that process in totality for you from the moment you said, okay, from home study to bringing Emery home?
So we started our home study process in January of 2016. 2017, and we brought Emery home in March of 2018. Okay. And I've been told that our process was one of the faster ones. So just to put that into perspective.
Wow. I mean, but I think something that you said, as I'm thinking through the process that you've gone through, and you said having those tough conversations and being honest about the answers. And then really when I think about the adoptive process, as you talked about it, is you went through a lot. And in the process, that I can only imagine how much that strengthened your love for the child, because you're like, I'm going through, I mean, literally moving to another country. I'm going through all of these hoops to get to the child that I'm going to love and bring it in my home as our own.
So I don't want to romanticize, like, when we first met, the very first day we met Emery at the orphanage, I had my 2.5-year-old Malia beside me and my husband, and we were jet lagged, sleep deprived, and this romanticized notion of them bringing this baby with almost like the halo cloud, and that you hold him and that you're in love with him, that didn't happen for me. Just to be completely honest, it was, okay, there's a baby in my arms, and yeah, I love babies, but there was no instant connection that this is my child. That's not how my emotions are wired. It was, okay. And that grew, like, within a week, we were like, oh my God, it was there, but it took time for me. And it was okay. Like, at one point during that process, I'm going, what is wrong with me? Like, this is your child. The orphanage staff was waiting for me to bawl when he was put in my arms. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, I feel like I should pinch myself or something and start crying so that I can give them the reaction that they want. Mm-hmm. But, I think that's one of the biggest lessons is everybody needs to be true to themselves and do what's right for you in those moments.
Wow. I love that you shared the honest moment, because you're right. I think sometimes we feel like, especially we think about having a kid, if it doesn't happen the way that we think it should happen, or the feelings that we think we should have that define motherhood, it sounds like you're saying to be patient with whatever those feelings are as you go through the process. And I think that kind of lends me to ask you the question of, I mean, what mindsets or beliefs did you have to change to deal with what wasn't happening and or your definition of motherhood?
So I don't know why we do this, but as women, we don't typically ask for stuff. We don't ask for help. We don't ask for stuff. And I don't know if this is society, but I felt like there was something wrong with me. Like, why couldn't I get pregnant, right? Like everybody else around me. And even though I knew there was like nothing I did, I still didn't talk about it. And I didn't, I didn't even talk about it with some of my close friends, because for some reason in my mind, I just felt like, it just shouldn't be talked about. And please don't come at me for this comparison, but, I equate it like when you look at a cancer patient, right? A cancer patient has to go through treatments to get better. And if you had cancer, you would walk into your boss's office and you would say, hey, I need this time off. I need to go to the hospitals in the morning. And it wouldn't even be a thought at times, right? But with fertility, you don't do that. A lot of the times you don't go into your boss's office and you don't say, hey, I'm going through fertility treatments. I'm going to need, the first hour, I'm going to have to start an hour and a half late every morning, or I'm going to need this time off, or, I'd like to be, considered for some paid time off or unpaid time off. We don't do that. And I had to really retool my brain because, I couldn't compartmentalize what was happening to me on that side with everything else in my life. I'm pretty good at it on a regular basis, but I really couldn't do that. And so I had to really change my thought process. So when it came to, the fertility treatments, I had a really uncomfortable conversation with my boss, who is a male, and, said, this is what I'm doing. I am going to need to come in an hour and a half late, for the next 2 weeks. And, this time here, somewhere in there, I'm going to need a couple days off, because anybody that's gone through IVF, when you go for an egg retrieval, it's not a happy day. It's not a happy feeling. And you need some time off to kind of recuperate from it. And then when that embryo goes back in you, you don't, you kind of want to be at zen and you want to, do what you need to do. And so I actually told him, And I said, this is what I needed. And it was really uncomfortable. And I couldn't figure out why it was so uncomfortable, to be quite honest, but it was because we don't talk about this stuff. And then when it came to Emre and the adoption, I was able to walk into his office and say, look, I'm going to Morocco. I only get to see my child for 2 hours a day. So I can work for you as opposed to taking 6 months off. I will work, and I will work the regular hours that I work for you, but I'm going to do it from there. I mean, and this was obviously pre-COVID, so working remotely wasn't as, okay as it is now. But that's what we did, and that's how we made it work. I mean, he needed me to work, and I wanted to work, and I wanted to earn a paycheck. But the Shamina 5 years ago wouldn't have even asked, right? I would have just said, okay, I got to take this time off. Or, I would have just tried to figure out all of my IVF appointments and just make it work around my work schedule. And that's not how it works. I don't think that you can do that. And so that was probably the biggest retooling. I think the second thing for me is I like to control things. I like to, most of us are like that actually, in that, and you don't have any control. You can do everything 100% right and the result can still not be great. And so you almost have to figure out how to surrender to, that higher being, if you believe in that, or to the universe, or just to science, whatever it is. It's just the fact that, it was really tough for me to let go. And what helped me with that is, I did go for counseling, and I did, have a crew. There was a support group of people that were going through IVF at the same time. And as much as my friends want to help, or as much as your partner wants to help, there's nothing like having a group of people that are going through the same thing and that can understand what you're going through, not only physically, but definitely emotionally.
And that's good. I was going to ask you about that whole, first of all, wow to have that conversation courageously about, hey, I'm going through this, and especially to a man who may not understand, your boss, and talking to them about it and saying, I'm going to need to take this time off because I've got these appointments. You're right. It's not something I think that a lot of times we talk about, particularly if we're talking about it with maybe male counterparts who we probably think do not understand. And then to even take the time off to say, I'm going here for 6 months, that was definitely, I commend you for that. And hopefully for any woman watching to really rethink your options and rethink how you can have those conversations. I think about, that's one type of support. And there was others where sounds like you had other women who were going through the process. I mean, how did you navigate situations where, or what would you say to a woman who maybe feels like she doesn't have the support from maybe employers or doesn't know where to find her support system?
There are, anytime you go for IVF, and I've gone to a few clinics, so, they do offer or will be able to refer you to counseling services, number one. And most of them will have, there are support groups all around. You can research them for people going through IVF, and you can even give specific sort of scenarios, and you can find groups and virtual groups. So I wouldn't say that, there are resources out there, and I think you have to actively seek what you need. And I think that's the other thing that I learned through this process is you have to be selfish, and women are not really good at that, about what you need. And so you're so, good at maybe getting the job done, or, fulfilling your partner's needs, or if you have other kids, your other kids' needs, and you often come last. And, you can't do that through this process, because mentally you need to figure out what it is that, allows you to reset or allows you to get that boost when you need it. So you have to be resourceful for yourself. There are groups out there, like I said. The other thing is, find an ally at work. It doesn't have to be your boss. Maybe it's, if you're more comfortable talking to a girlfriend at work or someone in a different department or whatever that is, it makes a big difference, because, most of the time you're going straight from a doctor's office to work. You're not, most people aren't able to go home. Maybe post-COVID that will change. But, sometimes you may just need an outlet to talk to. You may need someone to just understand or cover for you if need be, if you're not feeling well or whatever that looks like. But I think it's really powerful to have an ally at work, regardless of what position that person's in.
Really, really good points, and thank you for sharing that. You said something earlier that I want to go back to. You mentioned, all your other friends were getting pregnant, while their husbands, just looked at them. and I definitely can imagine for any woman watching who may have to take alternative paths to motherhood. How did you come to that place or deal with those moments where you felt one less than because maybe it wasn't happening the same way for you?
To be honest, I think at those times I just let myself feel a little less than, and then you're allowed to have your pity party for the 20 minutes or half an hour, whatever that is, because I don't think you should just say, hey, stop feeling this way. I don't think that it works like that. So I would let myself have the little pity party for myself. And then I just would honestly remember that at the end of the day, this is just proof that it can happen, right? Like, so it can happen. There's different ways that it's going to happen or supposed to happen. And so I started looking at it like, okay, it was a whoopsie daisy for her and she's pregnant. And it's not going to be a whoopsie daisy for me, but just because she had her whoopsie daisy doesn't mean like there's not a finite pool of babies. And just because she got one doesn't mean there's one less available for me. And so I started just looking at it as, everybody has this, and it's just good energy and a good reminder that anybody can get pregnant at any time.
That's really good. And then as you walk through the process of shifting to go through those alternative methods, you kind of alluded to it in what you just said, that, hey, it happened for her that way. There's different paths. How did you have to come to terms with the fact that it was going to be a different path for you? How did you release and let go and believe, okay, it's not going to happen for me potentially exactly how it happened for them, and now I have to have the energy to go this way?
So I treated it like work. It was like, okay, if I don't get pregnant the natural way, then option number one is IUI, and I researched the crap out of IUI and all the fertility clinics out there and what doctors were getting reviews. And then, while I was going through IUI, I was like, okay, the next step is this, IVF. And as I was going through IVF, I was going through, the different sort of protocols, and I was researching things, I think, almost to keep my mind busy. But I always needed to know what the next step was, so I didn't put so much pressure on myself during that step that I was in. And I realized that was my coping mechanism. I have a friend that's going through IVF right now, and I told her that was my coping mechanism, and she's like, that would not work for me. I need to be in it to win it in the step that I'm at. I don't want to think about what's next because I don't want to get to what's next. And so, I think it really depends on how you work. But for me, it was always being the next step. And adoption was that step. And I knew, hey, you know what? I will get my child through adoption. And maybe that's going to take 8 years, or maybe that's going to take 12 years. But I literally would research the crap out of the next step. And that's sort of how I got through it. It wasn't a thing of what made me go, oh, okay, now this is not happening for me, let me do this. It was like, okay, how am I going to get to my goal? And it wasn't, I had to stop and think.
I love what you just said. It was, how am I going to get to my goal? And so it did. And I love what you said when you said, I thought about the other things because it didn't put so much pressure on me to have it happen this way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a powerful statement and moment that I just want to let that sink in, is recognizing that it doesn't have to happen just one way, and not putting so much pressure on ourselves as women to have this forced way, that it could happen some other ways. But the question becomes, how can I get to motherhood? How can I get the life and the child that I want? I think that's such a relief. When I think about it, to feel like, okay, well, there's multiple ways. There isn't just one way. And how can that happen for me? I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that.
I also just want to say this is, it's okay also not to be a mom, right? So I think, people will reach a point while they'll say, you know what, I'm going to go down this route, and maybe after this is where I'm stopping. And that's fine, and that's okay. And there is no guilt that should be associated to that. There's no shame that should be associated to that. And I often think that, you can't win in corporate world either, right? If you're a certain age and you don't have kids, people go, hey, she's so ambitious. Like, she doesn't have a family. But if you have the family, it's like, oh, oh, she's got a young family. I don't know if she can do what, Jack over here is doing. But I just sit there and say, do what works for you, and not because you feel pressured into keeping on going or not, or stopping for that matter. You really got to be true to yourself on what works.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you brought that up too, because you're right. At some point, for mental, emotional health, all those reasons, a woman could decide, you know what, this is where I'm stopping. I'm going to preserve who I am today. Mm-hmm. And that's more important than pursuing this ideal of what I thought I wanted and what I do want, but it may not be happening for me. And that's okay too. And I love it. And you're right. We can't seem to win at times. Not kids. Oh, well. And then if you don't have them, oh, well, too. So
yeah.
You just kind of either
way. How many, I get conversation. I just got a comment yesterday from a colleague that's like, it's amazing that you get so much done and you're a mom of young children. And I'm going, well, the guy beside me, one of my colleagues, also is a father of young children, but I'm pretty sure that comment isn't being made to him, which, that's just part and parcel of where we're at, and hopefully that we can change.
And it's interesting. I remember early in my career having a conversation about motherhood. Actually, it wasn't even solicited. I was asking for just kind of some advice or whatever from a senior leader, male. And he said, don't take time off once you have kids. I've seen so many women whose careers get derailed because they decide to take time off. And I'm thinking, wow, that was the only, and I remember that being like the main piece of advice he gave me. I don't remember there being much else that he said. And I thought, okay. And now fast forward today, I don't have any kids yet, but it's like, why would I really listen to his advice today? And the answer is definitely no. I think as we get to choose what we want to do, and there's no right or wrong answer to that. We're right at time, just got a couple minutes. So I want to ask, how do you think about, if a woman is watching this now or later, what 3 things would maybe you say to her about her journey to motherhood, whether it's traditional or not?
I think number one, it's going to be okay. Whatever you choose is okay. Just really be honest with yourself about what you need, what's going to make you survive mentally, physically, and an extension of that is ask for it, right? The second piece is ask for it. And God bless our partners for trying, but they often need to be told what we need, and we can't ask them to guess, because this process can be really lonely. And so whether it's your partners, your friends, seeking that external support, get it. And I can't tell you how important that is as you're going through this, because like I said, it's really hard to compartmentalize this from all the other aspects of your life. So I've kind of blurred the first 2 together. Is be honest with yourself, be selfish, ask for what you want. I think the third thing is, and I know that this is the hard one, but be vocal, right? I mean, we have a whole generation of women that are coming in after us, and there is no shame in any of these issues of, getting help to have a child. There should be no shame, just like the miscarriage conversation, you shouldn't have to suffer in silence. And I don't think we're doing the people coming up with us and behind us any favors by continuing to suffer in silence. Where you can have the conversation, where I know it'll be uncomfortable to begin with, that's only going to help, I think, people down the line. And so be vocal and stop shaming yourself or hiding, because there's nothing to be ashamed of.
That's good. I love that last point in particular. You don't have to hide in shame. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I love that. Thank you so much, Shamina, for being vulnerable, transparent about your journey. And I believe that. I mean, we've got a few women watching, and I believe what you've said has helped them and their process and their journeys as well. And much kudos to all the things that you've done to become a mom and pursue it passionately. And if, anyone ever sees her 2 little kids, you'll know what I'm talking about. They're absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. And thanks for having this conversation, because I think a lot of people shy away from it. So thanks for having the courage to have this conversation.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So to everyone watching, please share this with any woman that you know that might need the support and the encouragement and the wisdom on her journey to motherhood and fertility. And join me again next week, next Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern, for another conversation, a real conversation about owning your yes live. Thank you all. Have a good day.